Doctors warned me for years that time would catch me whether I cooperated or not. They spoke gently, the way people do when they expect decline to be unavoidable. They said my joints would stiffen, my balance would fade, my world would slowly shrink to the size of a living room. I listened. I nodded. And then I went on living. Today I am 92 years old. Isti drive myself to store. I still stand at my stove to cook my own meals. I still wake up with a sense that the day holds something worth meeting. And I have not been truly sick in over 3 decades. No hospital corridor. No revolving door of medications. No long nights of fever or weakness. To most people, that sounds like a genetic lottery win. But I know the truth. This life was built in private, through decisions so ordinary they rarely look like medicine. I did not arrive at this strength by accident. I arrived at it through discomfort. Through mornings when my back refused to straighten easily. Through moments of dizziness that made me pause at the edge of a room. Through the quiet panic of realizing one day that my reflection had begun to feel unfamiliar. That was my turning point. Not a dramatic illness. Not a crisis that forced change overnight. Just the slow, unsettling awareness that if I continued on autopilot, my body would quietly retreat without asking permission. That was when I began to pay attention to the smallest things. How I rose from a chair. How I breathed when I was tired. How often I chose convenience over care. At first, the changes I made felt almost embarrassing in their simplicity. There was no grand program. No dramatique overhaul. Just tiny adjustments repeated daily. Most of them took less than a minute. But minutes add up. And consistency reshapes what effort alone never could. Over time, stiffness softened. Balance steadied. Fatigue stopped dictating the rhythm of my days. Strength returned in increments so small they were only noticeable in hindsight. That is how real change arrives when you are older. Quietly. Without applause. What I learned along the way is this. Aging is not a sudden fall from a cliff. It is a slow series of choices, most of them invisible. It advances in the skipped movement, the rushed meal, the neglected breath. And it can retreat in exactly the same way. One overlooked moment at a time, corrected gently but persistently. The body is far more willing to adapt than most people believe. Even late in life. Especially late in life, when care matters most. I am not an exception. I am merely the result of what happens when ordinary habits are treated as non-negotiable acts of respect for the body. Strength did not return to me because I fought age. It returned because I stopped ignoring myself. And that is a decision that remains available at any point along the road, no matter how many years are already behind you. Every morning, before my feet touch the floor, before I reach for my glasses or acknowledge the day, I speak to my body in the only language it truly understands, movement and breath. Not exercise. Not stretching in the way most people think of it. Juste subtile instruction. I flex my fingers slowly, as though reminding my hands that they still belong to me. I roll my ankles in small circles, feeling the joints loosen 1 degree at a time. I gently wake my toes until warmth begins to travel upward. Then I take 3 unhurried breaths, deep enough to lift my chest and steady enough to calm my heart. It takes less than 2 minutes, yet it changes the whole direction of the day. It tells my nervous system that there is no emergency, no rush, no need to brace for impact. We are simply rising. There was a time when I didn't do this. I used to force myself upright the moment my eyes opened, as if speed were proof of strength. My body answered with stiffness and imbalance. One morning I stood too quickly, my vision narrowed, and my foot caught the edge of the rug on the way to the bathroom. The fall itself wasn't severe, but what it revealed was. For the first time, I felt truly uncertain inside my own movement. That unsettled me far more than pain ever could. It showed me that waking a body is different from jolting it. From that day forward, I changed the way I crossed the border between sleep and motion. Once I finish those quiet movements, I prepare the same drink I've been giving my body for decades.
Warm water first, never cold.
I add fresh lemon, a small measure of turmeric, and just a trace of black pepper. I sip it slowly, letting the warmth move through me before anything else enters my system. I didn't begin this habit because I read about it or because someone online recommended it. I began because my body was tired of fighting. I was catching colds too easily.
My joints felt swollen from the inside.
My digestion was sluggish, unpredictable. I wanted to give my body something that supported it rather than challenged it first thing in the day. The changes came quietly, the way most real changes do. My stomach settled. The heavy feeling behind my eyes in the morning disappeared. My joints felt less angry when I rose from a chair. Over time, I noticed that sickness no longer arrived the way it once had. It wasn't dramatic. It was steady. And that steadiness is what convinced me I had found something worth keeping. Now, this small ritual does more than support my health. It sets my tone. The movements tell my nervous system that I am safe to move. The warm drink tells my digestion that it is supported. Together they quietly switch the body from defense into readiness.
Note à performance.
Not a battle against age. Just daily cooperation with a body that still wants to work with me, as long as I listen to it first. Walking is the one habit I treat as essential rather than optional. I no longer measure effort by sweat or speed. I measure it by rhythm. Most days I walk for 15 or 20 minutes.
Some days I go farte. Other days I simply circle the neighborhood and return.
The distance matters less than the fact that I go. When I skip it, my body reacts before my mind does.
My joints gros garded.
My thoughts become dense and restless. There is a heaviness that settles into my chest that no chair or nap will remove. But when I walk, something loosens that no medicine ever reached for me.
My brise become quiete.
My steps find an even pace. Tension I didn't realize I was carrying begins to drain away through the soles of my feet. There was a morning many years ago when I told myself I would walk later. I had appointments, errands, responsibilities that demanded attention. I postponed the walk, thinking one missed day would not matter. The sun set before I noticed how different I felt. My knees ached in a way they rarely did. My digestion slowed. My thoughts felt scattered and short-tempered. The most unsettling part was the sensation of unfamiliarity in my own movement, as if I had borrowed someone else's body for the day. That night I understood what walking truly was for me. It was not exercise. It was circulation for everything that keeps me whole. From that day on, I stopped postponing it. I walk with no tools and few rules. Comfortable shoes. An upright spine.
Arms swinging naturally rather than stiff at my side.
I allow my breath to guide my pace instead of forcing my pace to control my breath. In for 4 counts. Out for 6. That slow release calms something deep in the chest that worry likes to live in.
Some morning I walk in silence.
Other days I greet neighbors, nod to passing cars, or study the details of trees I've passed 1,000 times before. The repetition itself becomes reassuring. It tells my body that stability still exists, even as years accumulate. Occasionally, I catch my reflection in a storefront window as I pass. I see a slower gait than I once had.
A narrower step.
And yet I also see continuity.
A man still in motion.
Still participating in his own upkeep. Walking restores my sense of participation in life more than any other habit I keep. It keeps my joints cooperative.
My digestion timely.
My mood elastic rather than brittle. When I return home, the change is always the same. I don't feel younger.
I feel organisé from the inside out.
As though the scattered parts of me have been gathered back into one steady line of movement. For my body, walking is not about adding years. It is about preserving coherence within the years already given. For many years I was convinced that I was eating exactly how an older body should be fed. My kitchen was full of fruits and vegetables.
I chose où le grain.
I avoided excess sugar. By all appearances, I was doing everything right. And yet, every late morning my energy would collapse without warning.
Maille en tirait d'easily.
My legs felt weaker on stairs. I would lose simple thoughts in the middle of a sentence and blame the passage of years for it. Nothing felt alarming enough to call an emergency, but everything felt like a slow retreat. It was the gentle kind of decline that hides inside routine. Then a doctor asked me a question that cut through years of assumptions. How much protein do you eat in the morning? I didn't have a real answer. He explained that after 60, the body does not process protein the way it once did. Muscles become less responsive to it. The immune system becomes slower to use it. Even the brain depends on steady amino acids to keep memory and focus intact. What had once been enough was no longer sufficient. My body wasn't breaking down because of age alone. It was being underbuilt every morning. I changed my breakfast quietly, without ceremony. No dramatic diet plan. No rigid rules. I simply replaced empty fuel with building material. A boiled egg became routine. Thick yogurt replaced milk. A small handful of nuts took the place of bread. Berries added color and balance. Nothing about it felt extreme. The portions were modest. The effort was minimal. But the effect was unlike anything I expected. At first, the only difference I noticed was that my stomach felt steadier.
No mid-morning dip. No hollow fatigue behind the eyes.
Then my hands began to feel stronger when I carried groceries. My posture improved without deliberate effort. Even my sleep deepened. Weeks later, I realized that names no longer slipped away from me as easily. My thoughts carried more continuity. It was as though my body had finally received the supplies it had been requesting for years. What surprised me most was how quietly strength returned. There was no sudden surge of energy that announced itself. Instead, it was the absence of struggle. Standing from a chair required less preparation. Walking felt more reliable. Illness no longer hovered at the edges of every season. The immune system, when properly supported, works silently. Food stopped being something I used merely to satisfy hunger. It became a form of daily maintenance, as essential as rest or movement. I no longer think of breakfast as a casual meal. I treat it as the first repair session of the day. What I provide at that hour shapes how the rest of the body performs until nightfall. Age does not steal strength all at once. It erodes it when the materials for renewal are missing. Once those materials return consistently, the body responds with quiet loyalty. Mine did. And it continues to do so each morning I choose to build rather than coast. The habit that quietly governs all the others begins in stillness.
Before I speak a word.
Before I absorb anyone else's urgency. Before the weight of the outside world has a chance to settle onto my shoulders. Ici. Just 3 minutes.
No posture tout perfect.
No ritual to perform. Simply a pause in which I decide the emotional posture I will carry through the day. I choose steadiness over haste.
Clarity auvergnoise.
Usefulness over worry. This small period of direction setting determines far more than most people ever suspect. For many years, I used to wake and immediately confront everything I feared might go wrong. Bills. Health. the unpredictability of other people. The nervous system does not distinguish between real danger and rehearsed danger. It reacts to both the same way. I lived, without realizing it, in a constant state of readiness for impact. My shoulders were always tight. My breath was shallow. My sleep never fully restored me. It felt normal because it was familiar. Only later did I understand that familiar does not mean healthy. A close friend of mine lived the same way, only more intensely. He carried his worries openly, as if vigilance itself were a form of responsibility. He followed the news obsessively. He measured every future possibility against disaster. Then one afternoon, his heart faltered without warning. He survived the event, but something fundamental never returned. His resilience, once dependable, became fragile. During his recovery, he asked me how I managed to remain so even in the face of uncertainty. I told him the truth. Worry takes what it is given. And I learned to stop feeding it before breakfast. What I learned over time is that the mind is not merely a passive observer of the body. It is an active regulator of every system beneath the skin. Thought directs breath.
Brise directe at rythme. At rythme directe circulation.
Circulation directs how well organs are nourished and repaired.
When the mind tightens, the body follows.
When the mind releases, the body receives permission to settle. This is not philosophy. It is physiology experienced daily. During those 3 minutes each morning, I do not rehearse tasks. I establish tone. I allow my breathing to slow.
I notice my posture.
I guide my attention toward what I intend to carry rather than what I hope to avoid. In that space, pressure loosens before it ever has a chance to harden. Over time, the effects became visible. My blood pressure stabilized without constant adjustment. My digestion became calmer. Even my sleep grew deeper and less interrupted. Fear still visits me from time to time. That is part of being human at any age. The difference is that it no longer takes up residence. I no longer serve it reluctantly with every thought. The day begins under my direction rather than under its demand. That is the protection this habit provides. It does not remove uncertainty. It prevents uncertainty from becoming the ruler of the body. In the quiet moments before the day begins, I do not seek perfection. I set alignment. And that alignment carries me farther than strength ever could.
At night, I guard my sleep with some discipline et on s'used to guard my livelihood.
I learned long ago that rest is not the absence of effort, but a form of maintenance that determines how much strength remains available the next day.
My evening follow a steady pattern. I lower the lights. I silence the screen.
I allow the pace of my breathing to slow before I ever reach the bed. This is not routine for comfort. It is preparation for repair. The body does its most important work when consciousness steps aside. Muscles release what they held all day. The immune system begins its quiet survey and cleanup. The brain sorts what to keep and what to discard. Nothing feels dramatic while it is happening, but everything depends on it. There was a time when I treated sleep as something optional, something to fit around obligations and distractions. Late nights felt harmless then. 1 extra hour awake seemed like nothing. But over time I noticed the cost. I woke with a dull pressure behind my eyes.
My balance felt incertain.
Small problems took on unnecessary weight. Poor sleep did not announce itself as exhaustion at first. It arrived as impatience, slower reactions, and a subtle erosion of resilience. Only when I restored consistency did the contrast become undeniable. Now I rise and retire at nearly the same hour every day. The body responds to reliability with trust. When trust is present, the nervous system settles faster.
The heart rate steady sooner.
The descent into deeper rest becomes smoother rather than delayed. In those deeper hours, something beyond simple rest unfolds. Swelling in the joints recedes. Tension that movement could not reach finally releases. Even old aches soften without being asked to. The brain, relieved of constant stimulus, clears what the waking hours deposited. People often say they envy how refreshed I appear in the morning, as if it were a fortunate trait bestowed at birth. They do not see the dozens of quiet nights that built that result. They do not see the discipline of turning away from stimulation when it would be easier to keep it. They do not see the patience required to let the body work on its own timetable rather than one imposed by convenience. Refreshment is not a stroke of fortune. It is the outcome of a contract honored repeatedly. When I wake with steady footing and a clear head, the feeling is not youth. It is coherence. Everything functions as part of the same conversation rather than as separate parts arguing for attention. That coherence carries into how I move, how I think, and how I recover from strain when it appears. No tablet replaced this. No shortcut produced it. It emerged from repeated cooperation with the body's natural timing. Sleep does not stop time. It teaches the body how to meet it with less resistance. And that lesson remains available regardless of age. The decision to begin honoring it only has to be made once, and then renewed each night that follows.